I was talking to a novelist I know recently, and I was asking them about what they're working on. And they explained the plot and the characters in the story. They told me exactly what happens over the course of the book. But they didn't tell me what the story was about. A lot of early stage founders have the same challenge. If you ask them about their company, they'll give you 5 different answers, and they're all good ones. It's not because they're confused or they don't know their market. They know their business, they know their customers cold. But every time they describe it, it's common for them to use different language depending on who they're talking to. None of those descriptions are wrong, but they don't fully line up. It's a problem that can show up in different ways. You're talking to an investor, they understand the problem, but the story just doesn't quite land. Or you're interviewing a potential hire, and they understand the product, but they're just not fully on board with your mission. This is the narrative gap. It's the distance between what you know and what others understand about your company. In this episode, I'm going to explain why technical founders often struggle to communicate even when they deeply understand their business. And I'll share some diagnostic frameworks you can use to see whether you have a story that shows customers, investors, new hires, and reporters like me whether you can actually execute. I'm Walter Thompson. This is Fund, Build, Scale. Fund, Build, Scale is for anyone who's interested in learning the basic skills required to launch a startup, secure initial funding, and transform their idea into a sustainable business. Get the newsletter on Beehive or LinkedIn, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please leave a rating or review. I spend a lot of time talking to founders, investors, and operators, and I also work one-on-one with founders, helping them with narrative framing and media preparation and coaching. The more founders you talk to, the more you notice a pattern. If you ask them what their company does and why they're the ones to do it, they have a really hard time getting the answer across in 30 seconds or less. If you're a founder, you have to have a story that works in every room, whether you're talking to an investor, a customer, a new hire, or a reporter. People put a lot of, and appropriately, people put a lot of time into developing their product, but the narrative, that narrative frame that describes what it does and why it's cool, it's usually an afterthought for a lot of companies, a lot of founders. Every company would do better if they had a really bulletproof way of describing themselves before they went out into the market. And here's the thing. Narrative is not decorative. If anything, it's load-bearing. Before you have any proof in terms of customers or revenue, all you have is a story. That story is going to do all the work for you in the early days when you're still putting your product together. That story is going to get you meetings. It's going to get people to quit their job and work for you. It's going to get people you don't know to say, I will work with you and take a risk. That story is going to get someone to say yes. This is the work I do with founders one-on-one. We clarify their story, pressure test it, identify the most likely questions they're going to be asked, and then we build a narrative they can take into the rooms that matter. If you're getting ready to hire or pitch or talk to customers or a reporter, this episode will give you a way to diagnose your story before the market does it for you. Here's a quick diagnostic test. Do you describe your company differently when you're talking to investors, customers, new hires, or journalists? Are those differences strategic, or are they compensating for a lack of clarity? Here's another question. When someone repeats your company back to you, do they get it right the first time? A lot of early stage founders think the problem is the deck. Usually the problem is deeper and further upstream. The company has no stable narrative center, or the founder is changing the explanation based on the audience. All of those explanations are defensible, but together they create doubt. If you're talking to a customer, they will sense that you're not telling them the same story that you would tell somebody else, like an investor. And if you're trying to hire someone, they definitely understand when you're not telling them the same story you tell a customer. There's plenty of reasons to have different answers for different audiences. People have different technical ability. You have to explain the product somehow. And at the earliest stage, the product could be a little unstable. Your market might be moving. You are still defining your ICP over time. You could have revenue from one thing and ambitions towards doing something else down the road. But if that's where you are, your story is the only thing that travels cleanly between rooms. Just to clarify, your message is not your pitch. Pitch is what you say in the room. Message is what survives after you leave. The real test is not whether you can explain your company. The real test is whether they can repeat it back to you. It's natural that a founder is going to optimize for the meeting they're in, but an investor or a customer or a future employee or reporter, they need to be able to explain this after you've left to somebody else who hasn't met you. So if that message doesn't travel well when you're not there to carry it, it doesn't matter how good your live explanation was. You won't have the chance to sit next to everybody who hears your story and clarify exactly what you meant, fill in the gaps. After a conversation, look back and ask yourself, how would this person describe what we do to somebody else? Would they describe the same company that you think you're building? Will they remember the product and the market and the customer, or just the vibe? Here's another test. Would their version of the story make someone else more likely to buy or more confused? I'll repeat it. The pitch is the story you tell in the room. The message is the story that survives after you left. If the message changes every time, you don't have it yet. You've got explanations. You don't have a story. Comparisons can be really useful when you're trying to explain your company to somebody else. I use comparisons all the time when I'm trying to tell people about a movie I just saw. Sinners. I might describe Sinners to somebody who'd never seen it as Interview with a Vampire meets The Color Purple, or From Dusk Till Dawn meets Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Founders use comps because they work, but they're bridges. They don't tell the entire story. And they only work if you have a frame of context for both. Here's a fictional example. A marketplace for HVAC installers and people looking to save money with the heat pumps and getting rebates. So maybe they would say, we're the TurboTax for heat pumps. It's not a terrible explanation. It's directionally good. It helps people cut through red tape and difficult high-stakes regulations. Maybe it offers a guided workflow. It orients the listener quickly. But as the whole story, it doesn't work. It doesn't explain why heat pump contractors would want to use this platform. Ultimately, it doesn't explain what's become possible because this company exists. A comparison is good. It can open the door, but it cannot carry the room. Here's another self-diagnostic. Are you using a comp because it clarifies what you're offering, or because your first sentence just isn't fully baked? If I take away the comp, does your company still make sense? Does the comp describe your customer, the product, the workflow, or just the vibe? This is a story about Michelangelo. Someone asked him about the challenge of carving a statue of David, and he supposedly says, can't possibly be true. He supposedly says, it's easy, you just chip away everything that isn't David. It's similar for storytelling. How do you decide which part of your story has the most weight? It's a process. Does it travel across audiences? Does it include the buyer? Does it explain the value? Does it scale beyond the first product? Does it describe what becomes possible? For an early stage startup, the strongest frame is often the one that connects all those moving pieces into a system instead of treating each feature as its own story. Think of it this way. When someone asks you what your company does and you start describing features, you're telling them what you've built. Your first sentence should just describe what the world can do now because your company exists. If you can't do that, then you're not really ready to ask a stranger to give you some money. That includes an investor or a customer. And you are definitely not ready to ask someone to quit their job and come to work for you. And you're for sure not ready to talk to a reporter. If you're building a narrative sprint, there's one question that will help you get a lot further. And that question, it's not, what's the problem I'm solving? What's my feature set? Who am I building it for? Who are my customers? The question is, what breaks without me? How is the world worse if your company goes away or never gets to exist? Think about the things you use every day. Your cell phone, Slack, eBay. How would the world be different? What breaks if you can't talk to your coworkers on Slack? If you can't find a unique one-of-a-kind gift on eBay? What breaks without you? That's the story. The reason why this works is because it describes the failure condition, it describes your customer, it describes the outcome you're offering, and it moves beyond we make things easier. It creates real stakes. A feature set only tells me what you made or what you're building. A failure condition explains why it matters. Complete this sentence, fill in the gaps. Without us, specific customer cannot complete specific job because of specific system failure. Write this on a whiteboard or Slack or someplace where everyone can see it who's on the team. Have everyone fill it in. You yourself included. Everyone should be on the same page. Doesn't matter who they are. Could be an intern, could be your CTO, could be an engineering lead. Everyone should be able to get a sense of how to complete that sentence. And if they don't all line up, you're in trouble. This is the emotional part of the work. A lot of founders want to cling to the thing that got them started, and that thing may still matter, but it might not belong in your first sentence. It's fair to say, and there's no judgment at all, but founders often mistake emotional importance for strategic importance, and they're two separate things. The product you launch with got you some early traction, gained you your first users, and helped you learn about the market. It created real actionable insights that help you move up to the next level or pivot when you needed to. But that's not the business. That's not the forward-looking story. That's part of your history. It's a really simple difference. History explains how you got here, and the story explains where you're going. And when you confuse the two, you make your company harder to understand. Your origin product should stay in your founder story, but it doesn't need to dominate the investor story, the customer story, or the media story. The first sentence of your story has one purpose, one job, and that is to make the listener understand what you do well enough to make them want to keep listening. The first sentence does not need to explain everything. In fact, it really shouldn't. The job is only to prevent confusion. Ideally, a clean first sentence names the category, it names the domain, it names your customer, and it names the outcome. It doesn't try to mention features or pricing or your origin story. Your first sentence shouldn't just be nouns and verbs. You should have adjectives in there like cheaper, faster, reliable. It needs to name the system failure. It needs to name your outcome. It's hard work, but it's worth it. A narrative frame only works if it works outside your head. So if you have to be the person to tell the story for it to work, the story doesn't work. That story needs a handle that lets you carry it easily and effortlessly into a meeting with an investor or a reporter, or when you're hiring a new employee or talking to a potential customer. That story can't become a different one depending on which room you're in. The core needs to remain the same. And if it isn't, people will know. They can sense this when they're talking to you. So go back to your existing materials right now, your website, your LinkedIn page, and pressure test your first sentence as if you were hearing it for the first time. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody else who's not you, who doesn't care about your feelings. What is the investor here? Do you have headwinds or tailwinds? Can your customers do without you? Can you describe it clearly? What is the customer here? Are you telling them about how you're going to save them time and money? They'll have less administrative overhead. They can get jobs done faster or offer their customers a better experience. Will working with you increase their risk? When you're in an interview, what is the candidate here? Have you explained why your company has a clear wedge? Have you explained how the company makes money? Were you able to convey why this is meaningful work? And when you're talking to a reporter, do they actually hear this is a new idea? Does your story have broader market relevance? Are you putting yourself forward as the right person for this problem? When I work with founders on narrative framing, we do this in detail. We come up with questions that reporters are likely to ask. We do mock interviews. The goal isn't just to find better wording. It's to find out whether the founder can carry that same story under pressure. I want you to write down every current explanation of your story. What do you say on the website? And what do you say on sales calls? What do you say in your pitch deck? And do investors repeat it back to you? What do employees say when they're explaining the company? How does LinkedIn describe you? What does it say on the about page of your website? How about your email signature? Once you've looked at all those data points, ask yourself 5 questions. Which explanation carries the most weight? Not the most complex, but the most load-bearing. Which explanations are bridges, not destinations? Are you using comparisons, analogies? It's like X for Y. What breaks without you in the picture? Is your failure condition obvious and concrete? What belongs to your history but not your story? Are you talking about legacy features or something you have an emotional attachment to? And finally, what's your first clean sentence? Does it name your customer? Does it describe the category you're in? Does it describe the outcome you're offering? Your story is not everything you know. Your story is the order in which other people need to understand it. Early stage founders are told to wait for traction, but you can't wait for traction before you have a clear message. Investors need a clear message to keep listening to you. Candidates need clarity before they quit their job and take a risk on your company. And customers need enough clarity just before they try something new. When it comes to journalists, if it's not clear, if we can't see the story, we're not interested. None of it happens automatically. The first step is climbing out of that narrative gap between what you know and what everyone else understands. And closing that gap, it's not marketing polish or technique, it's founder work, it's strategy work, and ultimately it is survival work. If you're a seed stage founder who's getting ready to raise or hire or pitch customers or speak publicly, this is the work I do one-on-one. We can clarify your core story, identify the questions you're likely to face, and we'll pressure test the narrative before the room does it for you. Ultimately, if there's one thing I want you to take away from all of this, it's that narrative is not something you polish at the end. It's something you build at the very beginning. If you want more information, you can reach me at fundbuildscale@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. The Fund Build Scale theme was written by Michael Tritter and performed by Michael and Carlos Chairez. Michael also composed Ocean, the track you heard at the top. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and leave a rating. It helps more people find the show. You can get the Fund Build Scale newsletter on Beehive, follow along on Instagram, and if you have a guest suggestion or a question, reach me at fundbuildscale@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Fund Build Scale is a production of Truth and Soul Media, LLC.